Good afternoon and welcome to our session, our webinar on legendary Polish e-invoicing system. Legendary because everyone heard about the system and almost no one has ever seen and tried how it works. And what sometimes is pretty surprising is that the system is to a certain extent operational now, even though it is used on an optional basis, and it is being used by, in principle, just a few components. So we'll be discussing the obligation that will be imposed by the Polish legislator on the taxpayers, on all Polish taxpayers, and on some of the non-established taxpayers as well. So let us start, and let me introduce my colleague panelist, Janina Fornalik. Janina is a partner in our VAT services at MDDP, responsible for the projects that are related to KSeF, KSeF meaning the Polish e-invoicing system, and experienced the advisor who was focusing on e-invoicing, may be responsible for some of the quite a few projects that has already been implemented or is in the implementation phase. And very happy to introduce also Mr. Paweł Sellera. Paweł Sellera, who is now the senior manager in NMDDP, will share with us a slightly broader view on e-invoicing, because Paweł, before joining MDDP, was a director of the VAT department and in the Ministry of Finance, also responsible for the e-invoicing. So this broader understanding, broader picture of the system as such, and the needs of the system will also help us to understand a little bit how this system should work. My name is Tomasz Michalik. I'm the head of our VAT practice. As we know very well, the VIDA proposal is not a proposal any longer. VIDA became the legislation. VIDA was already accepted and published in the official journal of the EU. And we are pretty happy with the fact that the Pillar 1, which is DRR, meaning the digital reporting requirements, and e-invoicing has been implemented in such a way that Poland will be able to implement its own system that is slightly different than the proposed e-invoicing as per VIDA, and will have a few years to adapt to the real full-time and the final VIDA system. This is one of the elements that we'll be discussing later today, that actually whenever we are talking about the e-invoicing or EU e-invoicing, we are to some extent discussing certain local variations of the e-invoicing. And one of these variations is Polish KSeF, because Polish KSeF will differ. Maybe a little bit, maybe in certain areas, but will differ from VIDA in few elements. But one of these elements is particularly important, namely the scheme of the invoice, the format of the invoice, structured invoice, will be different in the Polish KSeF than it is provided for in VIDA. And this is something that will be discussed in more details later. So where we are with the Polish system in terms of timing, first, what is most important is that we are working on the basis of the Council decision approval for Poland to introduce mandatory electronic invoicing. And the decision is valid until December 31st of 2026. So the question is whether Poland will be ready to implement the system before the decision expires, and whether the fact that the decision expires makes any difference for Poland. And starting from the last point, no, it will not, because as a matter of fact, if we start the system, then actually VIDA allow us to introduce the system without having a need to prolong the validity of the decision. And secondly, the Minister of Finance announced recently that there's no risk for KSeF implementation, and they will be ready with the implementation. And the dates for the implementation are the following. The major large companies will be large based on the Polish understanding of the large companies. Will be obliged to implement the system, start with the system as of 1st February 2026, and then we have a 2 months break, and all remaining customers will be obliged to implement the system as of 1st April 2026. Why there's this difference? Well, in principle, it results from the sort of testing need, you may say, that actually the fact whether the system is able to work will be known after February 1st, 2026, and if there will be any requirements to amend, to change, to replace some solutions, that should be done within next 2 months. And we have also mentioned that actually some of us have already seen KSeF in action, and this is because the system is operating as of January 1st, 2022, but on just a voluntary basis. So all companies were invited to join the system, but very few has accepted the invitation, and therefore we may say that just around, small number of the entities that are pioneering, that are testing KSeF, and therefore it's relatively clear that there's no say real understanding of how the system is working, because not many enough companies has entered the system. So there's no real experience. There is no real understanding of KSeF, just based on the fact that very few entities joined the voluntary system. But it will change. And if we ask what is actually KSeF, KSeF is a central e-invoicing systems that is being managed by the tax authorities, and using KSeF will be able to issue and receive and store the structured invoices. We are still calling this a clearing system, although this is very much a technical clearance. So as a matter of fact, the system doesn't accept invoices. The system only verifies whether some formal conditions to issue and receive invoices are being met. It's quite similar to the very well-known or quite well-known Italian e-invoicing system, and as a matter of fact, it creates a huge database for the tax authorities. Of course, KSeF has a similar systems working in other parts of the world. Is the real-time invoicing system, which actually means that the tax authorities will have an access to the invoice at the moment when the invoice is issued, which means that it should reduce or change the tax audit processes quite significantly. And as it's been suggested, probably this new e-invoicing system, this KSeF system, together with the safety that is being used to supply the VAT registers and the VAT returns by the taxpayers, will prepare the authorities to start offering the preliminary automatic VAT return for the taxpayers. That is something that we will see relatively soon. So I will pass the microphone to Janina Fornalik, who will go through the details.
Good afternoon. Maybe I will start with the information that you are invited to ask any questions in the Q&A section, which is available in the bottom of the screen. So we will we will try to answer your questions during our webinar or at the end if there will be more questions. Since mandatory e-invoicing system was planned to be implemented in July last year, 2024, we have already the regulations regarding this mandatory KSeF adopted by the Parliament and published in the official Journal of Laws 1 year before. However, the technical audit was carried out in the beginning of 2024 by the new government after the political elections, and the results of the technical audit were disturbing, or it was even said alarming, and that is why the system was postponed, the implementation, and because the system would not handle such large volumes of invoices. It was planned that even up to 100 million invoices could be issued in the system every day. So it's a huge amount of huge number of invoices. So that is why the implementation was postponed. And also in the meantime, the public consultations were carried out, as a result of the public consultations, some amendments were proposed by the Ministry of Finance in the draft bill in November last year. But the amendments are still not adopted by the government, and then, of course, the legislative process must be carried out in the Parliament. So there are still some uncertain aspects, such as the 2 phases of implementation. First date is February 2026 for the large companies over 200 million zlotys, Polish zlotys, and the rest is for the remaining other taxpayers. That the deadline is April next year. And also B2C invoices is still the question mark, because it's planned that the B2C invoices will be allowed voluntarily to be issued in KSeF. For very small taxpayers, there is another postponement until October 2026, but these are really very small entrepreneurs. Like one invoice cannot exceed approximately 100 euros, and total monthly sales cannot exceed approximately 2,500 euros. So for these small taxpayers, there will be still half a year of postponement. And also some other regulations are postponed for half a year, like penalties for not being compliant to KSeF requirements. And also, for example, the requirement to provide KSeF ID in the bank transfers when payments are made for electronic invoices. Also, one of the amendment which is considered and which was presented by the government is offline mode, also for temporary period until the end of 2026. And this offline mode can be applied by all taxpayers in this temporary period, but this offline mode doesn't mean that the taxpayer can issue the invoice like it is now in the company's system. The invoice can be issued in the company's system, and it is the valid invoice, can be sent to the client, but it must be issued in the format required by KSeF in XML file. And next day, it must be submitted to KSeF. This is the offline mode. Also, the draft of new e-invoice schema was presented at the end of last year by the Ministry of Finance, but it's not final. It was also subject to public consultations. And one additional issue was the attachment to KSeF. There is the idea, it was proposed that the attachment could be one of the section of the invoice in XML file, but not all data can be covered by this attachment. We'll talk about the attachments later on. So many companies have already started some preparation works in 2023, when the deadline for implementation was July last year. And we also were involved in support of implementation process in the companies. So that is why we would like to present you some practical issues in this webinar. And now we will present the scope, and I will pass microphone to Paweł.
Thank you very much. Scope is based on council derogations so far, so the scope is as broad as possible. It covers entities established in Poland, but also foreign fixed establishment of foreign companies. This is very important because this is in many council derogations. The question is who is covered, and the Commission standpoint is that the fixed establishment of foreign entity is covered also by national e-invoicing regulation. The same situation we have in Poland. So if we have fixed establishment in Poland and this FE is involved in transactions in Poland, it will be covered by Polish KSeF. So very important is the definition of the fixed establishment is investigate whether do we have or not fixed establishment in Poland. Is mere VAT registration is not sufficient to establish our fixed establishment, so we have to have structure, capital, and we have to follow Court of Justice judgment in order to investigate whether we have or not fixed establishment in Poland. So domestic taxpayers and to some extent foreign taxpayers having FE in Poland covered our B2B invoices as a mandatory invoices for domestic transactions, and some also is very important to underline then to some extent also cross-border transactions are covered by KSeF, but only the transmission of the invoices to KSeF and the invoices sent to our foreign contractor via another agreed manner, so that the foreign entity is not touched by KSeF, but the supplier of the goods or services from Poland, for example, to Germany, is obliged to issue invoice via KSeF and then send that invoice in agreed manner to the foreign contractor. Exemptions, we have few exemptions, of course, for small invoices. Also, foreign entities are not covered by KSeF if we don't have fixed establishment in Poland, so just VAT registration is not enough to be covered by mandatory KSeF. B2C invoices, they should be included in KSeF on a voluntary basis. So far, it's not possible to issue B2C invoices, customer invoices via KSeF, but after the changes announced, the B2C invoices should be included in KSeF. Of course, there's very hot topic now how to distinguish between the customer and the entrepreneur on the other side, and what are the risks for the supplier. So this will be clarified in the upcoming legislation, but there will be possible to issue B2C invoices also via KSeF. Of course, when the customer demands invoice from the supplier. Self-invoicing is also possible in KSeF, so this is also a possible solution. So B2B invoices are also possible to have self-invoicing in KSeF. Concerning international relations, foreign contractors, it has to be also clarified by the Ministry of Finance some aspects of self-invoicing in case of foreign companies, how to issue that invoicing. But in general, self-invoicing, self-billing is possible in KSeF, also in the mandatory KSeF. And as such, purchases from foreign entities will be not reported in KSeF. KSeF is based in order to have the sale invoicing. So the import of services, acquisition of goods or importation of goods will be not reported in KSeF. So we just report our sales, domestic transactions, and to some extent, as I mentioned before, also some foreign international transactions.
Okay, so this diagram shows how the system works and how the obligatory system will also work. And as you can see, there will be no one process of issuing and receiving invoices. It will depend on the status of the taxpayer, of the supplier, and of the purchaser. So the Polish taxpayer and also foreign entity having fixed establishment in Poland, as Paweł mentioned before, they will be obliged to issue invoices, B2B invoices in KSeF. So let's say they will prepare a draft invoice in the company's system, and then it will be submitted to KSeF. It's not the invoice, the structured invoice at this stage. Only after the validation, the positive validation of the system, the invoice will be assigned with KSeF ID, KSeF number, and this is this is considered as a valid structure KSeF invoice. The validation is performed from two perspectives. One is technical correctness. If the invoice is correct, if it is compliant with the XML schema. And the second point is, which is verified, is the authorization of the company or the person who issues invoice if the authorization is correct, if the rights are given by the system before. And the problem with validation is when the invoices are issued or sent to KSeF in batches, because there are two possibilities. One is to send invoices one by one, separate invoices, everyone is validated, and when the second method is used, sending the invoices in batches, for example, 100 invoice in one batch, then there is a risk. If there is any mistake, only one mistake in one invoice in the batch, all invoices are rejected, because the system verifies the invoices in the batch until it finds the first mistake, and then all invoices in the batch are rejected. And what it means that the invoices are not issued. The mistake should be found. The system does not refer to the mistake. No, there's no information which invoice is invalid. And so the company must find the mistake, correct the invoice, and send it again to KSeF. When there is positive validation, then the confirmation is sent back to the supplier with the KSeF number, and it is possible to get invoice visualization in PDF form. So this is the supplier's side. And if the customer, if the client is the Polish purchaser, the Polish taxpayer, all invoices will be also downloaded by the purchaser in KSeF, from KSeF. So there is no need to send invoices separately outside KSeF, because all B2B invoices to Polish purchasers will be downloaded by the purchaser from KSeF. What is important, that KSeF does not notify the purchaser that there is an invoice waiting for him in the system. So the IT tool on the purchaser's side should have this functionality and like download automatically invoices from KSeF. And if we have, if we issue invoices to foreign clients who do not, like B2B foreign purchaser who does not have access to KSeF, these invoices, as Paweł mentioned before, are also obliged to be issued in KSeF, but we should then send the, let's say, visualization of the invoice with QR code to the foreign purchaser. And the B2C purchasers, as we have already mentioned, it is planned to be optional to issuing in B2C invoices. So either they can be issued in the existing format like paper or any format, electronic format, or they can be issued also in KSeF.
Yes,
Okay,
and
now, yeah, about the further practical aspects which are important from KSeF, Paweł, please.
yes, answering the question from the chat, the question on the new version of schema, when will be mandatory. The Ministry of Finance is working on the schema 3, the new version, so will be mandatory when the KSeF will be mandatory starting from 2026. Will be announced most probably when the new legislation will be announced. So we are still waiting for the final KSeF schema. It will be not drastically change the schema currently in force, but will be amend some fields or define some simplified procedures. But as a rule, the new version of schema will be mandatory when the KSeF will become mandatory. Moment of issuing of an invoice, these are the core elements of the system, and the core elements of the system are not changed, well, they will be not modified. So the moment of issuing of an invoice is very important and very crucial for many companies, especially when we issue invoicing at the end of the month, or it's very important to identify the data. And the date of the invoice is not the date we have in our accounting on financial system. The date of the issuing of the invoice is a date when the invoice is sent to KSeF. Of course, we will receive the official notification with this date, so we'll be sure when the invoice is sent. But this is, of course, a big challenge for companies issuing thousands of invoices. So it's very important to identify the date of the invoice. This is important in order to also check whether the invoice is issued in proper time, and of course, to some extent, also identify the tax point. So this is the crucial moment. And from the other hand, date when the invoice is received is the date when the system assigns the KSeF number. So this is deemed to be the date when the invoice is received by the customer. So from that day, if we consider this day, and of course the tax obligation arose by at the side of supplier, we can deduct input VAT. So far, this is not any condition that we receive invoice via KSeF to deduct input VAT, although VIDA allows member states to introduce such requirements that there is no VAT deduction without invoice received via e-invoicing system. So far, we don't have such obligation. So if we do not receive invoice via KSeF, and we should receive the invoice via KSeF, but we didn't, that this not hinders our right to deduct input VAT. So the form of the invoice at this moment is not crucial to deduct input VAT. Of course, there are exemptions to that rule, as I mentioned before. So if you have failure of the system or failure on the part of taxpayer, in these exceptional cases, the date should be deemed to have been issued, the date which is shown in field P1 in schema as date of issue, our date, and then the date of deduction, date of receipt of the invoice is the earlier date, whether we receive invoice via KSeF, which is becoming operational, or we have actual date of receipt when we have still the failure of the system. So these are the exceptions to that issue, but in general, the moment of issuing invoice is a date when we send invoice to KSeF. There's no possibility to withdraw the invoice from the KSeF. We cannot cancel the invoices from the KSeF, so we cannot store the invoices. when the invoice is sent and needs to be corrected, we can only correct the invoice also via KSeF. So it's no possibility to somehow to cancel invoices which are now in KSeF. So if the invoice is sent, we will receive a notification when the invoice is semantically correct. The invoice will be considered as sent to KSeF system, and we receive notification, and we see the minute, the second when the invoice was sent to KSeF. And from that notification, we also see when our customer received the invoice. So when the KSeF number was assigned, so we will see the invoice received, and there will be no disputes whether the contractor received the invoice or not, because it will be deemed received as the KSeF number was assigned. And we have also some benefits from the KSeF system. KSeF is also a big challenge, but we have also some benefits resulting from KSeF. And first benefit is that the general VAT refund limit will be shortened. We have now general limit 60 days. Is up to 60 days when we have to wait for VAT refund. Statistics shows that average is 40 days in Poland, more or less, but the maximum date is 60 days. Of course, the term may be prolonged, but if the tax authorities have no doubts or questions, then the maximum is 60 days. After KSeF, the maximum date will be up to 40 days. So the dates for the refund will be shortened. We'll have simpler settlement of correction invoices in minus invoices. There will be no communication between seller and purchaser required. Then we have just the invoices corrected when was issued, and purchaser, when received the invoice via KSeF, will be entitled to deduct input VAT. So no further communication between seller and purchaser will be required. The invoices will be also stored in KSeF for 10 years, so there is no need to archive invoices anymore. From the perspective, of course, VAT law, we have also, of course, other obligation on based on other law requirements, but referring to the VAT law, the invoices will be stored in KSeF, so will be of course in the hands of tax administration. So that's why there will be no obligation to send additional structure, SAFT structure for invoices upon request of the tax authorities. So this obligation will be abolished. Of course, exception is if we issue invoices outside KSeF, then we have to submit additional SAFT for invoices structure. But as a rule, this structure will be not required anymore. And e-invoicing, of course, allows us to avoid current problems regarding the processing of invoices. So the invoices will not be lost anymore, will not be destroyed. That's why no duplicates will be required. All invoices will be in the same hub in KSeF, so there will be no possibilities that the invoice is lost or destroyed. So there will be no communication about no demands from the purchaser to issue duplicates because of the invoice was lost. So they are the main, I would say, benefits, and this will benefits, of course, are in general also in force in current voluntary system, but will be also continued in our mandatory system.
Okay, yeah, it's good what Paweł has mentioned to take advantage also of the fact that all B2B local invoices will be issued in the same format in the XML file, and it will allow to automate some processes regarding accounting or some reporting. So it's also good to take this opportunity, we can say, when we have the challenge with implementation of KSeF, but we can also automate some other processes. For example, with purchase invoices, Here we have also a very important aspect of that where the modification of the process is needed, because all invoices, if we are the Polish purchaser, all invoices from the Polish suppliers will be issued in KSeF and will be assigned to the taxpayer, to our company, according to the VAT number. So we will receive the huge number of invoices in one place. And then we'll have to identify which invoice should be referred, assigned to which department or which person who, in fact, made the order for approval and so on. So it is important that the supplier puts any specific element, some like PO number, purchase order number, or contract number. So we will be able to, we as the purchaser will be able to assign the invoice to the business owner of the invoice. Because of course, when the invoice is issued in KSeF and it is considered to be received when the KSeF ID is assigned, it doesn't mean that we accept the invoice, that it is correct. We still should have this path workflow where the invoice is accepted, and in case of any discrepancies, we should of course refer to the seller, to the supplier for the correction invoice. And also when there is a big large company who has branches, for example, it is possible to generate in the system identification number for the branch. And the same with VAT group. In Poland, we have VAT groups. So it is also possible that each member of the VAT group can receive its own invoices, which are assigned to this company, not to the group as a taxpayer. But for this, it is necessary that the supplier would put this additional number, except for the general VAT number for the taxpayer, to put this additional identification number on the invoice. There is specific field box for taxpayer free for this, which is dedicated for free. Taxpayer 1 is for the supplier data, taxpayer 2 on the invoice is for the purchaser, but there is another section taxpayer free, which where the data of this identification number of the branch can be given, or of the member of the group, or even the bank, if the bank is the factor. There are different roles possible where the entity which will be shown in this field, taxpayer free, he will also receive this invoice in KSeF. So in these cases, it should be considered how the process should be organized. And another practical aspect, which is also related with the previous one, because it also relates to the input invoices. These are invoices for the employees' expenses. For example, our employee purchases fuel on the petrol station or goes to the restaurant for the business lunch. So he needs the invoice issued for the company. And today he receives the invoice in paper and then brings it to the accounting department and receives a refund of the money. So tomorrow in KSeF, this invoice will also be issued in KSeF, because this is B2B invoice issued by the petrol station to the company. So this invoice also will be submitted to KSeF and will be downloaded by our company from KSeF. It is also necessary to put that the supplier, the restaurant or the petrol station will put on the invoice some identification, like the name of the employee or any identification number of the employee, in order to assign this invoice which will be received via KSeF to this particular employee. And also the question is what employee will receive when he purchases goods or services, if the invoice is not validated so quickly, because it would be really it's rather wishful thinking that it will take like a few minutes, a few minutes. I think it's too long, because the queue will be waiting at the petrol station if someone is waiting for the invoice a few minutes. So it should work, the validation KSeF should work like in a few seconds. So then the employee can receive invoice also in the printed version. However, generally it will go via KSeF. And also we have a transition period for half a year. There is a possibility that invoices issued by cash registers will be still valid, and only after this half-year transitional period they will also have to be issued in KSeF. And we have also so-called simplified invoices, when the cash receipt does not exceed the value of 450 Polish zlotys, which is about 100 euros, with the purchaser's VAT number. It is considered as simplified invoice currently, and it will be still a simplified invoice only for half a year after KSeF is implemented. And after this transition period, all invoices, even for €5, if our employee would like to buy, for example, charger for mobile phone, this invoice will also have to be issued in KSeF.
Yes, and the next issue, very important, and also many times communicated to the Ministry of Finance, the possibility to send attachments via KSeF. This possibility is allowed in some member states, like in Italy, and will be also possible under the mandatory KSeF. However, the details are not so precise. But the ministry announced that the attachments will be received and will be sent alongside with e-invoice, so will be sent together with the invoice, not separately. Should be also should handle first of all the transactions when the precise data of transaction, precise quantity of goods and services should be stressed, especially in case of fuel, telecommunication services, and media services. So these are the main businesses that will benefit from the attachments. However, as I mentioned before, that we're still waiting for the details, and we'll see how the attachment will look like. And how will they be detailed, but they should also contain some data that we could add. So there will be possibility to put additional data to those attachments. So this should be also announced in the upcoming legislation. So for now, under voluntary KSeF, there is no possibility to send attachments, but next year the attachments should be possible via KSeF. However, the technical details for these attachments will be published. The companies will also have to have connected to those attachments to connect attachments to the invoice. It should be part of the new schema. But as I mentioned before, the details will be published by the Ministry of Finance. And the QR code solution, this is the technical issue concerning visualization of the invoice. The QR code allows to link the visualized invoice with based KSeF invoice with KSeF. Allows us to check whether the invoice was issued correctly and was issued via KSeF. In some cases, when we issue invoices outside KSeF, or in cases we send invoices to our foreign contractors, in case of EC supply of goods, export of services, we invoicing via KSeF but then send the invoices in agreed manner via email, for example, but we put this QR code on the invoice, allows us to check and identify the invoice in KSeF, allows to check whether the source of this QR code leads us to KSeF. So this is the technical solution to generate these QR codes in cases of failure of KSeF, or in case of international transactions. Taxpayers will be obliged to generate these QR codes. Another also solutions are also introduced. We'll be discussing this in a moment. Another possibility is report the scam invoices, but this also need to be clarified by the Ministry of Finance how will be report the scam, so-called scam invoice to KSeF.
Okay, there is one additional obligation which will be introduced, let's say, together with KSeF. It has nothing to do, in fact, with electronic invoicing itself, but the Ministry of Finance decided to introduce this obligation to include KSeF ID, KSeF number in the bank transfer when payment is made for electronic invoice. Not only for when mandatory split payment mechanism is applied, but for all payments when the invoice is paid to active VAT taxpayer. Generally the KSeF number should be shown. This obligation is postponed by 6 months. So it comes into force, it's planned to come into force, as far as I remember, starting from October 2026. And there is also possibility to pay, of course, for collectively for several invoices, or even for hundreds of invoices in one bank transfer. So in this case, the so-called identifying, collective identifier can be generated from KSeF. And this diagram shows how the process of collective payment will look like. So when one bank transfer will cover several invoices. In the first step, we have the issue of invoice by the supplier in KSeF. The supplier receives KSeF numbers of the invoices issued. And in point 3, of course, the buyer downloads the invoices from KSeF. And the buyer decides to pay collectively for several invoices. So the buyer in point 4 should request collective ID in KSeF. So this is the buyer who decides which invoices will be covered by one collective identifier. And then the buyer, when making payment in bank transfer, should put this collective identifier. And so number 7 is making the payment via bank, and the supplier receives the payment, and what he can see is only this collective ID. So he doesn't know which invoices are covered and which are paid. So the supplier must decode the collective ID, and in order to enter the payments correctly into books referring to each particular invoice. So in point 8 here, the step 8 is to request for information which invoices have been marked with the collective ID. So this is additional administrative burden for the taxpayers. It requires also some modifications of the IT systems. And so in my opinion, it is not necessary for VAT purposes, in fact. And there are arguments to say that this violates the principle of proportionality. However, this is currently in the law. And however, there are no penalties for not not putting this KSeF ID or collective ID in bank transfers, at least at the moment. So we will see how it will be in the final regulations.
The KSeF schema structure is also a very important issue. We have now enforced the second version. We are still waiting for the schema number 3. It will slightly change the current schema, especially in terms of transactions with the local authorities. But there will be no huge changes no reversing changes to schema we have now. So if we map already transactions with schema, we have to have in mind that there will be new schema, and to some extent we have to also verify if the new schema will change some of our processes. In schema, we have the fields which have different functions. We have mandatory fields when records are mandatory and will be verified during the semantic verification validation via KSeF. The validation will check whether all mandatory fields were fulfilled. If all fields are correctly fulfilled, I mean, there are no logical errors like numeric fields with other marks. We have optional conditional fields. Records these are mandatory. It's necessary to meet a certain obligation. For example, we have to also insert additional comments on the invoice, like split payment, for example, or reverse charge, to some transactions, of course, provided by the Polish VAT law. We have fully optional fields. There are a lot of fully optional fields because they were required during the consultation of the KSeF. The boxes are not required for the semantic correctness, and are not required by the statutory provisions. So we have in schema different fields, different functions of the fields. So this should be borne in mind that we have, of course, different kind of possibilities. And of course, we can visualize our invoices in PDF or on HTML formats. If we visualize the invoice, there's no obligation to insert KSeF number, but the QR code is then mandatory. And schema consists of different sections, different fields concerning transactional data, general data on taxpayers, payments conditions, payments orders. There are also explanation of the Ministry of Finance how to fulfill the different fields in the schema. So it's helpful to help us to match and to match our invoices with the requirements. So with the mandatory KSeF, then the mandatory schema number 3 will be in force. So will be published soon alongside with the new legislation, which is also underway.
Yeah, and from our experience, when we supported the clients in the process of implementing changes aimed to adoption to KSeF, there are sometimes problems with mapping of data from the source from the systems, IT systems of the company to the structured invoice, to the XML schema, because even the KSeF ID is very long. It has like about 30 digits. So sometimes there is no space in the system to add the KSeF ID when the invoice is issued, but it should be in somehow added in the company's system, because when the correction invoice is issued, the KSeF ID must be shown on the correction invoice, the KSeF ID of the original invoice. So this is one of the example when there can be some problems of adjusting the systems, the company's systems to the new requirements of KSeF. And finally, we would like to present our approach to the implementation process. We offer the comprehensive support for the clients. not strictly technical, but ensuring the compliance with the regulations, tax regulations, and ensuring that the necessary modifications are implemented, introduced in the processes, in the internal procedures, in the contracts. And we also can support the client at this stage of choosing the IT tool for communicating with KSeF. We may help to define the requirements for the system. And when we support the client in the whole process of implementing, we start implementing changes to KSeF. We start with the introductory workshop where we present how KSeF works, what are these difficult issues, what changes should be needed in the company, and the workshop is dedicated not only for implementation team and not for IT people, but for all people involved in the process of issuing invoices, of receiving invoices, for accounting people, tax people, in financial people in the company, and IT, and also IT. And at the second stage, we analyze and we map the company's current existing processes of issuing and receiving invoices. And in stage 4, we recommend changes which are necessary and also which are nice to have. Because sometimes, as we mentioned before, there are possibilities to automate or to improve some processes or reporting data. And stage 4 is adapting the procedures, internal procedures regarding sales, purchases, or workflow to the new requirements. And also we support the client with modifications in internal with the contracts or other regulations to be compliant to KSeF requirements. And the last stage is the support in testing of the new system and verification of technical correctness of structured invoices. So we provide the comprehensive support. We have already experience in this kind of projects. And so as you can see from this very short presentation today, the implementation of KSeF in the company is the very complex project and covers very specific issues apart from IT. There is a need of many changes which should be implemented in the processes and internal procedures and contracts. And of course, we are ready to present our proposal for the comprehensive support in the works, preparation works for KSeF, but also in any form which is required. Sometimes we provide ongoing support when any issue arises during implementation process in the company. We may provide our support, our answer, for example, how the correcting invoice should be issued when we have corrective invoices, like for bonuses, when one corrective invoice refers to hundreds or even thousands of original invoices because it's, for example, yearly bonus, or how another issue is how the corrective invoice should be issued in KSeF when there is no change of amounts, only there was a mistake of the data of the purchaser, for example, in the name or in the address of the purchaser. This invoice the corrective invoice should also be issued in KSeF, but without changing any amounts, only for the correction of the data of the purchaser. We also encountered this kind of problems during the implementation projects in the company. So you have our contact details on the slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. I'm not sure because I can't see the questions. Paweł, maybe you can look at the Q&A section if there are any other questions when we can answer now.
I believe I answered the questions during our webinar. We had one question on chat concerning the QR codes and international transactions, and we had also a question concerning the new schema, when the new schema will be presented. So I believe I refer to that. Maybe last word for me, the Ministry of Finance intends to finalize the legislation before summer. It will be very difficult since we don't have a law bill adopted by the Council of Ministers so far. The new schema will be presented with the new legislation, so hopefully this month, maybe in April, we will see some drafts on it.
Okay, we are on time, just in time. So thank you very much for joining our webinar, for your attention. I hope the information presented was interesting and useful for you. So have a good afternoon and thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.